I doubt it.
That's
Because I would have brought
advertising.
brainwave sensors and put it on
Apple.
people's head and done
Oh,
more.
right.
Because that's
Is that
what
it?
the
Yeah, I
Apple
mean, that's
logo
true.
is.
Yeah.
Could be another occasion.
But that would be cool if you did. And then you can see how fresh it is
Yeah.
after
Yeah.
you've taken a bite.
Okay.
Sorry?
Yep.
Okay.
It's exciting.
Yeah.
It's 31 degrees outside. It's
It's a
hot.
good day to be inside in the aircon doing a talk.
Yep.
It is. Good banter.
Yeah.
I think so.
Okay, we're on. We're on air, Chris. We're right to go? Good to go. Good to go. Okay. Hello and welcome everyone to the Digital Village stream. This month we're going to be talking about the future of work. And what I'd like to do is ask you to come on you and your imagination to come on a journey to explore the future of work. And I want you to think about someone that you know who is in the 80s or 90s and the amount of change they have experienced in their lifetime. Just have a think about that for a moment. And then consider someone who is leaving school now and the amount of change that they will experience in their lifetime by the time they're 80 or 90. And consider the rate of change, the evolution of technology, the evolution of humanity as we respond to different environmental and social challenges. So what will life look like? What will work look like? What will our relationship with work look like? And how might we prepare for this coming age of work and life and technology integration? So we are joined by futurist, technologist, consultant, educator and special guest, Anuraj Gambhir. Anuraj has worked with some of the biggest and brightest companies around the globe, including Singularity University, Sharp, NASA, Orange, Siemens, Ericsson, CSIRO and lots more actually. And now he helps businesses transition into innovative organisations through speaking, consulting and educational engagements. Welcome to the stream. It's great to have you here, Anuraj.
Thank you, Jason.
And so it's a privilege to have you here, mate, and I'm looking forward to having you share with all of us your knowledge around the future of work and also your inspiration about what it could look like. Very much looking forward to that. And to include a level of tangibility to the conversation in terms of what this means for us as people and professionals, we are joined by business psychologist and human capabilities expert Rachel Atkins. Welcome.
Thanks, Jason.
Lovely to have you here.
I've got you a present.
Oh.
I brought you an apple.
Oh, that's terrific. That's just what I've always wanted. I'll eat that mid-show in a minute. So yeah, looking forward, Rach, to hear your views on the kinds of skills and capabilities that we're going to need to develop as this change takes place in society and taking into account technology and what we're going to need. And finally, the notorious Luke Fabish.
Woohoo!
He and I will be facilitating the conversation and essentially asking questions on behalf of the viewers and listeners to try and get as much out of you guys as we can. And yes, so awesome as always to be here with you, Luke. Is there anything you'd like to share before we get started?
No, it's great to be here. I'm very excited about today's topic and about this talk because this is the path that I think Digital Village is on right now. We're constructing these teams for the individuals who are geographically dispersed, bringing them together with technology. They're very customer-centric, and so they have to bring all these non-traditional human capabilities to technology projects. So I think this is really exciting, and I'm really looking forward to hearing what Anuraj and Rachel have got to tell us today.
Yeah, cool. Awesome. So just quickly before we start, a bit of housekeeping. For those who are joining us from different social media, you can dial in and ask questions for Q&A or comments, and they'll come straight through to us. You can do that via Facebook and YouTube. Or if you want to go straight to the website, digitalvillage.network/stream, you can also see the video live from there, and also make comments in that chat box as well, and that'll come straight through, and we'll address them either as we're going or probably at the end. So, I think we're just about to hear it from the man. Over to you, Anuraj.
No, thanks, Jason, and great to be here. And so we're talking about future of work, which is such a broad topic, and the title here we've given Megatrends, Mindsets, and You. So what we're going to be covering is essentially some of the select key megatrends in that space and how it really is shaping the future of humanity, looking at exponential technologies, looking at big data and how that's influencing future of smart cities and human-centric sort of designs in that regard. We're going to be talking about future-proof skills and mindsets, and then some key takeaways. So to start with, we're talking about a world that we're living in, which is VUCA, and I'm sure many of you have heard that term before, which is volatile, uncertain, complex, and ambiguous. And we notice that the rate of change is very rapid. We see that there is lack of clarity on many regards, and there is complexity, to which effect I've actually got a term called simplexity, which I coined almost 3 decades ago, and I'll be referring to that later on. And then we've also got, obviously, lack of meaning and ambiguity, as we say, in that regard. So the first sort of megatrend that we talk about is about living in that hyper-connected world, where even Time magazine gave you, us, we, the person of the year back in 2007. And moving on, we talk about the 4th industrial revolution, where we have moving from Industry 1.0, which is mechanization, through to production and automation in Industry 2.0, right through to enablement and of further automation and electronics and IT sort of convergence. And then what we currently sort of undergoing in the phase we're in is Industry 4.0, which is really the convergence or hyper-convergence of many technologies, such as IoT, cloud, big data, to that regard, artificial intelligence, blockchain, AR, VR, mixed reality, and so forth, and robotics and digital biology and many other sort of areas. So I wanted to share this slide here, which looks a little complex there, which is actually the latest version of Gartner's emerging technology hype cycle. I'm sure some of you might have seen that, and this is the latest version of that. We see so many technologies which are sort of crossing the chasm, and they're sort of moving rapidly from that early adopter phase into moving into the more mass market adaptations of area. And we look at things like digital twins, which are at an early stage, but they have a lot of influence towards, I would say, future work, because you can simulate environments, people's behaviors in that regard.
Just quickly, digital twins?
Yeah, digital twins, where you can really sort of map and provide almost like a software equivalent or a virtual version of what like a smart city is in that regard. And I might refer to it a bit later on, or she also, yeah.
Cool.
But it's really a very interesting concept which has been developed by many of old, and Deloitte has actually taken that much forward. Deloitte's one of our key partners at Singularity U, who've worked on it very much from the center of the edge, it's called. And so one of the things I've highlighted in this slide is actually social distancing technologies. Obviously, in this era that we're living in, we all know that that's a key topic. And there are many areas in technologies. I've actually been working on with a few companies on disruptive or kind of radical wearables, which can measure your temperature, look at different vitals and approaches to being, and even looking at heart rate sort of algorithms, which can understand and see if you're pre-symptomatic for COVID, because temperature is actually a lagging indicator.
And is some of these things?
Yeah, actually, so one of the devices I have here is using heart rate variability, because that's a measure of stress, and you can actually decipher a lot of things. This is called heart math. I'll be talking about this. I've got a slide on this a bit later on, so, and I'll mention about some other variables. But as you see, we've got many themes of technologies from 3D, 4D printing, as we're moving into the future of sort of exponential technologies, AI, AR, VR, quantum computing, neurotech, and that's a massive space with the brain-computer interface. And I'll again mention about that. So what we're actually living in is exponential times, and I think even the layman today understands what exponential is about, the logarithmic scale with the pandemic, and then certainly what we see in the growth of that, which has been so unfortunate. But so what I wanted to show in this slide is really linear versus exponential, right? So when you're growing linearly versus exponentially, it's at the early stage, it's very similar. But it's once you cross the knee of the curve, move from deceptive to disruptive stage, it sort of grows so rapidly. So I wanted to actually ask you if we've traveled 30 1-meter steps on a linear scale, we've traveled 30 meters, right? But let me ask you, if you traveled 30 exponential steps, how many? Does anybody want to have a go? How much would we have traveled if you traveled 30 exponential or logarithmic steps?
I know the answer.
Yeah, you know the answer already. So, okay,
So I can't comment.
You can't really interact. So
Let's throw it.
So there's the answer. Yeah. So you've traveled 1 billion meters, 26 times around the Earth. It is phenomenal, right? I mean, and that's why it's very hard to comprehend that exponential growth once we've crossed the chasm and moved into that sort of phase. So we talk about the exponential technologies, but also developing an exponential mindset.
Can you just elaborate a little bit more for those who are unfamiliar with the term exponential and how one step can equal 1 billion and whatever that number is?
Yeah, sure. So I think it's what we're simply talking is a doubling. So moving from a 2, as you see on the screen there, 2 to 4 to an 8 to a 16. And if I really go back, you'll see on that logarithmic scale where things, they multiply so quickly, and it's that law of doubling, right? And the logarithmic laws that we would have learned in mathematics back in school is how quickly they sort of multiply.
Rate of change.
And the rate of change is so fast that's what we refer as exponential.
And have you got examples of where people might be seeing that now?
Yeah, I think with technologies we're really observing that, because when we talk about Moore's law, for example, with technology we're seeing the doubling of the transistor sort of condensation and the integration of technology, but that has been occurring so fast. And now that we're seeing, even yesterday when Apple launched some new products, we've seen the new processor is now many times faster than the previous version, the A14 chip, for example, on the new iPad, the 2 iPads they launched, iPad Air, and also now the Series 6 of the Apple Watch, which has now got a processor which is 4 times faster now than the previous version. So we're really seeing that happen in so many products and areas. Even the computers that we're using, they get obsolete so quickly in that regard.
And it's perpetual, isn't it? The technology that's enabling us to create more technology is improving all the time as well. So it's just kind of building upon itself.
Exactly. And I think even data, when we talk about how much data is being generated, it's growing so rapidly. And again, I'll be touching on that a little bit later in terms of that growth of phenomenal big data we mentioned. Yeah.
Cool. Yeah, awesome.
Yeah, so it's no longer about creating ecosystems, it's about curating them. And this is some of the industries I sort of worked in, which is the telecom, which is kind of where I grew my foundation, my career in, helping set up Optus and T-Mobile and AT&T in the US and Orange in Switzerland and so forth. But then working very closely with the media industry and the convergence about where IT and the whole sort of scenarios coming together with so many new services which became hubbed from the sort of telecom world, and how ICT is sort of enabling the future. So I think it's really looking at each micro segment and where you really work is very important to understand how to curate your relevance.
Okay, and when you say curation, curation for the consumer to actually help navigate the complexity of just the huge array of the things in each industry, is that what you're referring to?
Yeah, I think the consumer has been the center of it. So you're very much curating your ecosystem around the consumer. Yeah, for sure.
So this is organizations doing the curation for the benefit of their customers.
Yes. Yeah. At the end, it's benefit and experience, which is all that matters, right? It's the impact. So I think a lot of people just get sidelined and carried with technology, whereas that's just an enabler, right?
Yeah. So what's the real benefit they're seeing in their lives?
Exactly.
Yeah.
Exactly. Yeah.
It's something just on that. I don't want to divert too much away from it, but it's something that Richard Webb actually from Catalyze often said when I was speaking to him a few years ago. There's these industries that are taking place, and they're very they're vast. And like as a consumer, how do you navigate through that, and how do you actually find what you need when it's so time consuming? But just having a service of curation is incredibly important. Yeah.
Totally. Yeah. I would say even hyper curation, taking it to the next level, because it's when we say micro segmentation or even nano segmentation, because like I mentioned earlier, it's about the individual ultimately that you're trying to curate a solution towards. So that hyper personalization is what matters at the end of the day.
Highly personalized.
Highly personalized and customized to that.
Yeah, terrific.
So, Anuraj, do you have an example of that, of an organisation that you're either working with or familiar with, where you're helping them curate and understand what that ecosystem is?
Yeah, certainly. So in the health and wellness space that I'm working with few startups, we're actually curating solutions around solving COVID-related, issues of certainly, for example, authentication into a building. How can we automate this whole space of, how people are going and individually scanning your temperature as we entered Work Club earlier? You could automate that. That could be just your camera with video analytics doing that already for you, or a robot or a drone out there doing multiple people, which is what has been deployed in China, in so many other places. So you could be much smarter with using technology and curating specific solutions for the need. Yeah. Many examples.
I'm just wondering if it's a different conversation, any kind of the adoption of that, like people actually being okay with that.
That's right, yeah.
But that's technology in general, though, I guess.
Well, that's where it needs to then filter out and see, okay, where is it that we want to target? So it's moving from that bigger vision of the helicopter view right down to the nano level, right? Yeah. So on what I'm showing here in this slide is actually the 3 horizons which organizations, and I think this is where we talk about future of work, and people tend to get so bogged down with operational sort of elements in Horizon 1. And I personally have spent a lot of time in the Horizon 2 and 3, so we talk about Horizon 1 being the now, which is obviously extremely important, but looking at what's coming up, or what are new products and services, new models, what's emerging, but then really having that vision, or what I talk about, the massively transforming purpose that an organization or an individual can have, is where you really need to spend somewhat of your time, and say here approximately 25%. Which is really looking at the next level impact, where you talk about the 10x and beyond potential for value proposition and generation in that regard. So one of the key areas I've been focusing quite a bit on is the holistic approach of future human-centric smart cities. And a smart city is almost a living organism. It's actually a living, breathing entity where you've got so many domains, clusters. It is such a wide topic. I mean, even the definition of it varies quite a bit. We talk about the interconnections become so important, but it's the data that is being generated around it, and how the different sectors like education, healthcare, transportation, energy, and manufacturing, and everything else, so academia, government, startup ecosystems all sort of come together to formulate something which is very human-oriented. And that's where, because we get carried away with physical infrastructure in the smart city thinking, it's much beyond that. You have to really think with humanity at the core of it again.
Data's like the bloodstream almost.
Yes, data's the new oil. And that's kind of what, moving on to the next, we are actually generating so much data. We're actually generating over 2.5 exabytes of data every single day. And and it's increasing, probably out of date with the numbers anyway, but the amount of clutter there is in the data, it's only when you make that big data into, and sort of create insights from it, and you can take the right actions, that it becomes meaningful, right? So and that's why we talk about, we're drowning in information and somewhat knowledge, but we start for the true wisdom. And that's what I'm talking about in the next wave of this message here. And I think that in smart cities, we've got different layers, and we can actually connect so many scenarios. I mean, one example I'll give you is of a startup I've been mentoring in the energy space called What Cost. So we talk about the smart home, it's called smart living or intelligent living, and we've got a box which sits next to your meter, your electricity meter at home, and you can actually measure, do a fingerprint of every appliance in the house. And with that, with a certain amount of time, say 2-3 weeks, we're able to gauge and understand each appliance separately. And so imagine if grandmother didn't turn on the kettle at 8 in the morning, which could be a typical thing, that could be an alert going to the carer. And so we're touching on aged care, healthcare scenario, which is a different domain altogether. But it's those cross-pollination of thinking across the board, which is where the smart city thinking sort of comes in and builds very deep elements where AI and technologies like that. I talk about AI not being artificial intelligence. I say augmenting intelligence. That regard. So again, talking about data still, data being the new one, like I said, it's really when you can use that from descriptive to diagnostic to predictive to prescriptive analytics. So when I said before grandma fell down, you would actually be able to see a trend using other IoT analytics in there and see that she's not walking properly, maybe with the camera with the video analytics, being able to see movement and other trends with wearables and other smart devices that you've got, which can seamlessly sort of give you very interesting things. So before my car even breaks down, for example, there's another startup called GoFar, which we've been mentoring, that we've been looking at how do we decipher using that data to look at the predictive analytics, so that you can take the right action at the right time. It's about building that foresight, as we call it. So now moving on to the space of, I think the future of work, as I say, if I sum it up in one line, it's future of work is human. It's moving from skill sets to mindset. And it's really what we've seen with the World Economic Forum, and I've been a little bit involved with them. In fact, early this year at in the Davos meeting and so forth, we've had further revelations of how some of these are evolving. We've actually moved up the ladder when we look at things like critical thinking and creativity and complex problem solving, which have become such innate skills or mindset-related topics which need to move up the ladder, where humanity is really at the core, and it cannot be displaced with machines as yet.
And so why wasn't that always there beforehand?
Well, I think with the progress of technology that we've seen, and that how certain jobs have been displaced, automation has happened, obviously in manufacturing, as you've seen over time. I think it's that wake up, which was happening for a while, but it sort of it escalated to a certain point, was sparked on many an occasion in different industries. So I'd say domains are all waking up rapidly to this, but this is where they need to keep up with the trends and be ahead of the game. And now we're really seeing that happen. People who are living in an old school sort of format are waking up to this new world order much rapidly now.
Because the more we automate, the more we kind of highlight the value of the uniquely human capabilities.
That's right.
Isn't it? Yeah.
And I think it's also important to note that AI, people think that, it's coming displacing jobs. It's actually creating more jobs than it's displacing even. So if you look at the numbers, even a few years ago, I remember it was 1.3 million new jobs which were created as opposed to 500,000 which were removed. I think those are numbers from, was it KPMG?
Oh, really?
Yeah. So it depends on which sector.
Yeah.
It obviously varies, everybody's at different stages of evolution there, but it's very interesting.
And in the technology space, I mean, I've been working in this area for 20 years, looking at helping people understand what their skills are, their soft skills, capabilities, and the list that you've got here, in the technology industries that you're working with, how are people embracing that, and what are some of the challenges that you're seeing with people even understanding what they need to do differently?
Sure. So I think you're certainly touching on an area which you're such an expert of, which is the mindset, I think, and that's where I think it's leadership, right? Which is where you need to start with quickly, and also at the coalface, because having worked in innovation and on both ends of the spectrum, I've seen that you really need to wake up an organization with its culture right from bottoms up and top down, both ways, and you sort of look at how rapidly can you make them aware of this new world order that's coming up. So it's about painting a very clear vision, having your purpose and your deeper understanding which industry are you really in and how that industry is shaping up. So when I look at examples like Kodak, they were the ones who invented the digital camera. And what did they do? They missed the boat, right? They were stuck in chemicals. So what business were they really in? It wasn't, if they realized deep down and did that introspection, it was not about creating photographic film, right? It was actually about creating memories. And those memories is what digital photography was enabling with the next phase of evolution of technology. But they missed it. I mean, their own employee invented that first digital camera, Mr. Sasson. And I remember, obviously looking at that time when the digital camera revolution came about with 0.01 whatever pixel or megapixel sort of resolution, but then we integrate, because I was involved with the integration of the camera in the mobile phone. We launched that first camera phone at Sharp, and launching it in Europe with Vodafone. It was quite a revelation, because the resolution was so poor, but it was use cases, and it was looking ahead in the vision, saying you could send multimedia messages, you could actually have people talking, looking at each other, and it was that early sort of thinking of where FaceTime, and as we see with the revolution we've seen of imaging and capture and transmission of live video today is created from that. So I think it's really thinking at that stage 3, at that horizon 3 is what I was coming back to again. Yeah.
So just a very, there's a greater importance on, human centricity, really, making it, everything that's being done is actually to serve people better, and there's more of a I guess, importance put on what people value.
Exactly.
And understanding what customers want.
That's right, yes. Yeah.
And so you mentioned, you've said a couple of times, a new world order. Can you elaborate on that a little bit?
Sure. Well, I've just kind of made up that term. I said,
Okay.
I refer to it in some of my articles, actually, and I've talked about it earlier, but it's more the kind of a vision, as I said, it's and kind of milestones to a world which is something which I've actually more recently created, a white mirror concept, which is moving from dystopia to utopia, to more an ideal future that we want to create, using positive psychology, using facets where we can dream, where humanity is really at the core and center of everything that we do, because technology becomes invisible. It's a pure enabler. And that exponential means of disruption come together to create that ideal future for us.
Completely. I mean, it's something that happens quite a lot, isn't it? You look at all these kind of futuristic movies, and they're all quite dark, and AI is going to take over.
That's right, yeah.
And the whole Black Mirror, it kind of sets these kind of possibilities that we end up doing what we imagine and dream about anyway. So we have to be careful with that. Which is why I quite like your white mirror analogy, because at the same time, it's one thing why I'm very passionate about technology, is because anything's bloody possible with it. And so with that, we can actually create the future that we want. It doesn't have to be bad. We're the ones who create technology.
Exactly.
We have the choice to determine which way it goes.
I think the great Buddha said, "What you imagine, you become." And I think it's what you surround yourself with, what you, in every aspect of your well-being, is what influences you. And then it's the age of imagination, as I call it. And I think that's where we're moving with that future of work. Is saying, it's evolving so rapidly from the mechanization of that work in the mundane tasks, which are going to be, outsourced to technology with robotics and so many other means, whereas humanity comes back to that level of creative thinking and intelligence and that imagination focus that we need to work on. And I mean, in fact, that's what this next slide is also sort of talking about, is, creativity, curiosity, empathy, humor, passion, all sort of come to that level of unique, customized work versus the old school labor analysis, perseverance and routine standardized sort of elements, which are explicit to a more implicit sort of approach, where humans are much better on the right side, as you see there on scale from yaki.com. I thought this was a good sort of analogy there, as we're seeing that evolution from automation. Right, Rachel.
It's just interesting thinking about the human. Human you mentioned as really is the future of work, and whether that's a way that organisations are creating new value propositions for people, more focused on people, but from a work perspective, humans, what is our relationship to work as well, and how are we going to? I guess this is kind of your thing, right? But how are we going to prepare for this new world of what you just showed before with the the labour on the left, and so what kinds of things are we going to?
I can also probably point out where most of our training effort goes. Where's it gone? No, on the next one. Where all our training effort goes currently, the way that we train people, and also when we're screening people for positions and things like that, we're always looking on that left side, aren't we?
And education. This is probably one of the biggest areas that really needs to be. I mean, it is being improved, but it's kind of, this is what sets the tone of how things actually change. And there's still so much education that probably on the left, the labour side, where we need to be kind of focusing on the more humanistic side.
And I think the evolution of, if we think about leadership programs, so you mentioned leadership earlier, If you think about leadership programs, for decades, they've not really focused on the left-hand side of what you've got listed here. They've focused on that inspiration and trying to empower people and the idea that the higher emotional intelligence somebody has, ideally the more successful they are as a leader. And one of the challenges I think I've faced, part of the delivery of those types of the skills development focused on that in the past, and this is why I'm looking really to the left-hand side of this, is that whilst we're equipping people with those skills, the measures internal to an organisation focus on the left. So there's a conflict. So I tell people you need to be more inspirational, you need to demonstrate empathy, you need to listen more, you need to engage with your teams, you need to spend time asking how people are you okay? And yet the way that we measure performance, and a lot of organisations measure success within a business, is based on the left-hand side. It's on delivery, analysis, compliance. And I think this is one of the areas of a dilemma which we are moving more towards. And actually, I'm going to just bring it back to something you mentioned earlier around that curating the ecosystem for consumers. Because in effect, whilst we are all at home and this blend of work-life balance now between an individual, their work and life, whether they are an employee, whether they're a contractor or a freelancer, and who they are as a consumer, everything's blending in. And the way that we can use data is actually to help empower people. So if we think of, when you think about marketing, you talked about micro-segmentation, and when we think about when we're accessing Netflix, for example, and now, the Netflix tells us what programs we might like, and it points us towards those. And so we've become on the receiving end of that. But when it comes to actually understanding our skills and how we apply that to the workforce, there is a gap. And even now, and I could say there's 7 people in this room, and most probably you have a feeling or some understanding about what you enjoy in work and what you're good at, but do you really know? And how do you then understand and really get to understand yourself to be able to make informed decisions about that future?
How are you supposed to know? I mean, maybe that's something you're supposed to. School would probably be helpful to teach you how to do that.
So this is the thing, and it's really interesting because one of the conversations I was having this morning, in fact, last week I was talking to a teacher who, one of the challenges they face, not only through the COVID situation, but actually they co-teach and they have 52 kids in their class. So imagine doing that via Zoom. Imagine trying to keep 52 kids engaged. I mean, that's a challenge. But one of the interesting areas is around how do you pick kids, at the age of 11 or 12, they don't really understand what their skill sets are. And I actually, in 1995, I was doing my dissertation on careers education actually in schools. And I went and spoke to the head of a careers centre for a large region in England. And I said, why do we not provide more tailored careers advice for people? And why can't we really help people understand what they're good at? And he said, it's all to do with politics, and it's all to do with colleges and what courses they run and where we need to send people. And it was less about empowering and the system, and this then from a political system, but then also from organisational systems. If we think about this, coming back to this slide, if we think about the history of manufacturing, if we think about the process line, the Taylorism view of, you have a task to do, you shall not think, you shall just do this task. If you do it well, then that's great. We're now in a completely different environment. We're completely different, where we're saying to people, all of the things on the right-hand side, you need to be creative, you need to be curious. And yet we still have organisations that stop people from doing that, whether it's through fear. We still say to people, you need to deliver this, you're not allowed to, we don't want you to. So there's a real challenge for helping people really explore that. And for me, one of the benefits about helping people have more insights is it gives them more choice. So if we just go to the next slide, I just want to set some context actually. So this report came out in 2017, and it was, I've taken some of this, it's from a Deloitte report. And it was fascinating, because when I did my master's in organisational psychology 17 years ago, I still remember somebody telling me that by 2020, 35% of people will be working from home. And I was told that in 2003. And I was really excited about that. I don't think they knew about a pandemic. I wonder if they did. You never know, like Bill Gates 5 years ago when he actually told everybody we're going to have a pandemic in 5 years. So even then, I've worked in this world where we're immersed in this, trying to help people understand, equipping people with the soft skills they need for the future. But this year has really brought everything to a fore. This year has brought the need for people really understanding how resilient they are. I mean, resilience is just, from the health and well-being work that you're doing, is just, we've been teaching resilience in organisations for years, but this year it's really transcended work and life. When we think about how people demonstrate empathy, I don't know if you remember at the start of COVID when people were on Zoom, everybody listened really intently. People were asking questions and everybody leaned in. People were really asking, are you okay? Is everything okay? Yeah. And it's almost like we've moved past that now. And it's really interesting to explore what are the skills that people are trying what do they need to use. And I was actually talking to somebody today who does a lot of work in leadership, and they made a point, and it sort of breaks my heart, because they were saying if people didn't demonstrate empathy or didn't have any EQ beforehand, the pandemic and what's happening now is actually, it's becoming worse. So if people were a bad leader or a bad manager before, they're getting even worse now through the fear and the lack of understanding they have of how to connect with people. So they've moved really into that micromanagement. They want the need for control. But the good news is, why we're here, if you didn't know what the good news was.
We're waiting for the good news.
The good news, the good news is that we can help. And the good news is that actually Digital Village, Luke and Jason and the Digital Village team have really embraced this understanding about how can we help people really get into the flow of the work-life balance from a freelancing perspective. We know that when people, I'm sure that a lot of people listening are in that position, and the lack of employer-employee relationship actually still lies with organisations of how do we ensure people feel they're delivering and they're able to use the skills, and we can help them develop those so they feel good. So just relating to this report, we can see here that since the year 2000, 53%? 53% were soft skill intensive occupations in the year 2000, and that's going to shift to, in 2030, to 63%. And the good news for everybody who is listening in, and for everybody in this room, we can see that the soft skill intensive occupations, managers, professionals, engineers, and ICT. So that's the good news. We know we're going to be employable, I think.
Good start.
There's a bit of work out there for us. And what's even more exciting is that, so Digital Village is engaged working with Marcus Bowles of Working Futures, and we are using his human capability standards actually to help understand and give people the power of anybody connected with Digital Village in the ecosystem, of really understanding what those skill sets are that they have. So if we think about the list that was in the World Economic Forum that you showed just a few slides ago, Marcus has actually taken a lot of research and has identified, I think there's 18 soft skills here. And if we look at bottom right quadrant in action, customer focus is actually really at the fore of, it's just on the next slide, Anna Rush, sorry. So on the bottom right, we can see that customer focus has actually made its way. And this is absolutely fundamental to everything you talked about in terms of when people are working, whether you're an employee, whether you're a freelancer, whether you're a contractor, understanding what your customer needs from you and how you deliver that and how you put customer at the centre of the way that you deliver work. And Luke, that was something we were talking about earlier.
Yeah, absolutely. I think the more that we can understand another human's needs, like in this case our customers, that we can serve them better, we increase the success of our customers. But obviously, as you say, these are skills that we don't just have for our customers, for everybody that we work with and who is around us. We're more able to work successfully with people over the long term as well, to be able to build those relationships, to understand each other, and to value what people bring to their task beyond the technical skills that they have.
Yeah.
Just having pure, actually a genuine understanding of people and actually treating people as people. Like, it's not like in a big organisation, it's like, no, there's this front of, professionalism or being a certain way, which is just complete waste of time. Like, especially as a customer, they're not going to feel like they're just speaking to a robot, like they're not, there's no real connection.
In fact, I refer to that as tearing of the walled gardens. It's really, you're right. I mean, it's the hierarchy and the old school sort of thinking is no longer. It's matrix organization. It's it's really about how well you use what you know, rather than what level you sit on and so forth, right?
Yeah.
I think we're seeing competing human needs at the moment, because we can see, yes, we want to foster the creativity and empathy and all of these things, but again, on the other side, we have a lot of systems set up about managing people in a different way, and effectively managing those people in that way increases the success of the people whose job it is to manage them in that manner. So I think that's the challenge at the moment, and like you were saying, Rich, with a lot of leaders who aren't used to operating that way, it's more difficult now, because it's more difficult for them to be successful in the way they have been in the past.
Yeah, and if we take if we just take the four capabilities that are listed there under leadership. So leadership, which is you described earlier in it, engaging and inspiring people and how you make the right decisions at the right time. Engagement and culture, agility, direction and purpose. I think the agility and engagement and culture is really what is differentiating leaders previously to where we are now. And having people to be able to work in an agile way, and especially now where a leader may be experiencing a huge amount of personal challenges, where with the COVID situation, with regards to family, their work life, and yet they still need to step up, they still need to provide and be agile enough to support their teams, whether they're direct employees or freelancers, or even their customers, if they've got really good relationships with customers and clients, about how do you support others and show that, whilst at the same time delivering, because we still need to make money, we still need to be able to do that. So we've actually used there's an organisation in the US called WebAssess, and they've created a suite of assessments called My Inner Genius, which IBM actually currently use to assess new collar work. So people looking to want to go into IBM, they can use this assessment online. And we're actually bringing that into Digital Village, so we can actually look at assessing and helping people really understand what their core strengths are in line with the human capability standards, and how that links to the future of digital work and the future of digital roles. So people will have an opportunity in 2 or 3 weeks' time to actually be able to complete the online assessments and then get a strengths report. Well, actually, it's more than a strengths report. It's actually understanding what how they align to 14 major ICT roles. And then linking to development pathways and potential career opportunities for people. So they get that opportunity to see and start to understand about what areas that are listed on here do they need to maybe improve. But also for me, one of the exciting areas is about the transferability of skills. So when you think about the skills on this page, they can be in any industry, any organisation. It's about how do you then think about, if I'm going to move somewhere new, where do I need to go? What can I do? And you can assess yourself using this.
Which is a huge, shift in the way employment is taking place and the way people, the way people used to be employed, you'd have one career for, however long. And then progressively over time through the different generations, that's gotten shorter and shorter.
Yeah.
And then now coming, even more into a gig-based economy, and where you can, and it's actually better because you have these kind of transferable skills where you don't need to be doing one thing all the time, and it actually benefits other things that you're doing because you have a wider skill set.
Yeah.
Yeah, I think this is a phenomenal amount of work that Dr. Marcus has done and certainly been working on is the human capabilities, and I think it can really be taken to the global stage at a much further level. So what I've got in fact on the next slide is another aspect of this, which we really talk about transforming those old school dogmas to a new level of thinking, which is like moving from user experience to user engagement, a tech-driven to an engagement-driven economy, consumer to community, needs to wants, empathy to meaning, story to narrative, and so forth. I think this is a great book, by the way, by Bruce Nussbaum, Creative Intelligence, which gives you a lot of cues around this whole space of how do we evolve from IQ to EQ to really the AQ, as we talk about adaptability quotient, as we see is becoming so much more important in this regard.
Adaptability, you want to just quickly touch on why you find that, because it's just the rate of change, I suppose, is increasing. We need to adapt to so much more change all the time.
Exactly.
And just respond.
Yeah, I think it's about being so open and having that will to connect, because in fact, any organization, be it how big they are, Apple or Google, they can't do anything alone. They need to have such a collaborative thinking. So I think there's a term I call collaboration, which is open collaborative innovation, and really about how do you bring together your network and bring that whole aspect of broader thinking to adapt to a situation in almost real time, because the skills are changing, the need for updating our knowledge and the trends that are shaping the future are so rapidly evolving, again with the pace of technology and the pace of change.
Yeah, it's getting back to that exponential change, isn't it?
Exactly, yeah. And all those factors coming together at multi-dimensional levels is influencing our future. So it's hard to keep up with everything. So it's really your network, your thinking to that level. How do you bring that leadership style, which I really then refer to as conscious leadership, to that level? And what we say, moving from the skill set to mindset to even heart set, where you can really connect with people so deeply that you're able to get the best out of everybody. And I think that's the ultimate for humanity. In fact, I'll touch on that in the next. So what we've got here in this slide is actually quantification of some of those 21st century skills. It's one of the companies I've been closely working with as their advisor is NeuroSky, which has been one of the pioneers in the brain-computer interface. And they've got a consumer level and also other professional levels, EEG, so electroencephalography. You measure your brain waves from your forehead, and from neocortex, and being able to sort of look at your raw brain waves, your alpha, beta, delta, gamma waves. In fact, I could give a demo of that at another stage, but you can actually see and map using a special algorithm called the peak performance, the PPA algorithm, and looking at certain behaviors like creativity, empathy, engagement, mindfulness, collaboration, and even look at negative emotional states or positive emotional states like happiness and calmness, and being able to quantify them to a level that you can actually map it to a mental wellness state. So I think there's a lot of research which has been happening on academic level, now by organizations who are able to sort of quantify and look at how you improve and tap the right states of the brain.
And also, which is probably something, just the importance, that's another change that's probably taken place over time through the different revolutions, is the actual importance of people's happiness. I don't think that was ever much of a consideration in as organizations developed. And it's something that I might actually just bring up a bit later, but I just made a note of it, around freelancing and work-life balance and the skills and capabilities that are going to be required for the future. But what are also, it's funny, like the drivers and motivations of these changes in the way people are working as well. And happiness and fulfillment is playing a huge part in that.
Totally.
People are generally becoming more aware and interested in things that more going to provide a better experience for people, you know,
Yes.
and also wanting more for themselves. And so that's determining a lot of people's career changes as well. You know, there's a lot of people. I mean, our business is kind of built on it. People want to step away from corporate structures and this where they're non-appreciated in the 9 to 5 into this kind of gig-based economy where they're like looking for something more meaningful. And I really believe that's very much the future of work.
Totally. And I think if you take that cue from even the nations, how they measure not GDP but GHQ, gross happiness quotients. Countries like Bhutan and many others which have actually mapped it and quantified a lot of that. And
Quite cool,
it's the global, the group happiness which you can sort of measure in people, and that's where you build those skills of compassion and gratitude and kindness.
And if you think about it, what's actually, you know, is there something more important we should be measuring? You know, as humanity, you know, like maybe environmental things and things like that, but you know, what's actually important, you know? Anyway.
Exactly. Yeah. So in fact, what I've got on the next slide here is a product, in fact, which I was mentioning earlier, called HeartMath, Inner Balance, and this actually helps you get to your coherent state, your brain-heart coherence. And it measures, I just clipped that to my ear, and basically it'll measure my heart rate variability, which is a measure of stress, HRV, and it sort of gives me, I can even look at respiration, HRV, and blood pressure rhythms, and sort of look at how do I find that balance state, or equilibrium state, releasing stress, finding that true balance, and building resilience. And there's actually 40,000 plus neurons in your heart, and there's more messaging happening from your heart to your brain. So I think it's, when you look at it in an interesting sense, and that's why I talk about it as measuring heart set, because people talk about B2B, B2C, and I've sort of mentioned edge to edge, which is connecting heart to heart. And I think if you're able to sort of bring this level of thinking amongst the broader organizations, and I, you know, sort of had this revelation when I was involved with the Wisdom Health, which is a new movement that was started this year, and I was very fortunate to be part of that in Davos, the World Economic Forum, and where we really look at humane technologies, ancient wisdoms, and this whole new conscious leadership regime and silent thinking to uplift humanity to the next level. And so I think it's a very interesting phase that we're facing, and I think on the other side of the pandemic, I sort of have this vision and say, what if every organization becomes a B Corp? Looking at the other end, not just thinking about profits, but thinking of people, purpose, and planet before profit.
Well, the world would just be a better place, wouldn't it?
It will become so much better, right? And I think the wake up is happening now. The great reset is now, and we're if we can just come out much better. There's plenty of motivation and inspiration to make that happen.
Definitely.
So I think that's where I think it's important to look within and see. Ikigai is a great philosophy which the Japanese have promoted, and it's about the reason of being, of really that introspection and saying what you love to do, what the world needs, what you get paid for, and what you're good at. When it all sort of converges, it sort of brings about that thinking of what is my true purpose in life. And if you can translate that to your TP, what the way we refer to it in Singularity University, even for an organization, saying our massively transforming purpose or our vision is, and then sort of work backwards from there and see that's where we want to be to uplift humanity.
You know, we kind of scanned through the slides, and this really stuck out to me. I was like, it's incredible. It's
a great philosophy. I think.
It really is. Yeah. And you know, we talk a lot about work-life balance, and it's a bit of a whatever. But it's not. You know, a lot of people kind of like, well, what's work-life balance? It's not. In my mind, it's not like a time thing, like giving up one to the other, and it's a balance like that. But it's pretty much this. It's like it's actually a combination of everything, of work and life, like everything that's actually important to you, because it's just one and the same. But it's like your life's work or whatever it is. But what gets you like, what is it? What the world needs, what you can be paid for, what you're good at, and what you love. Like if that's not your life or your work, or if it is, then that's an incredibly meaningful existence.
And I think so I was just going to say, I think this is, whether we sort of realize it consciously or not, this is what we're often, I think all of us are kind of like reaching towards one way or another, looking for that center.
And I think we've seen the spark of this very early on from organizations like even Google, when they gave 20% of their time to employees, saying, you know, you can spend one day of your 5-day week. Back then, I remember with Eric Schmidt, who was chairing Google, and I remember hearing him live on stage talking about this in the world at the in the Mobile World Congress actually, and it was just so profound because you didn't hear that from corporates couple of decades ago, saying this is what the way they're going to treat their employees and give them the freedom to look at what do they want to work on, what's their hobby, and actually take it forward.
Yeah.
So if you can merge work life to that level, that's the future of work to such level, and this is what philosophy is probably. Yeah.
And I think coming to your point, Luke, is that it's what people subconsciously are striving towards, and actually what we're able to do now is help bring this to people's consciousness and really give them the insights and the information. And we're surrounding ourselves in ecosystems where this is possible to have conversations, and it's actually okay. And now that we know that, you know, from a freelance perspective, the number of people in the freelance world is growing significantly all the time. We're not going to have a Google giving us 20% off. We can do that ourselves. We have that choice. We now have that gift to be able to set the boundaries of what we choose to do and when we choose to work. And some of the research that we've got happening in Digital Village that Freddie is leading, and about trying to really get to understand what people value from a freelancer perspective is awesome. And we're trying to ask that question, what makes you happy? And most people, unless you sit down and ask them the question, they actually don't always think about it. But now by asking the question, giving people permission and the time, people start to understand what their value is.
It makes it explicit, doesn't it?
What's important to them.
Absolutely.
We have
So
very little time left.
I'll just be finishing a couple more slides, really.
Sorry.
So I think it was that old VUCA which we need to translate to a new VUCA, and that's what that mindset shift we talk about. So having vision, understanding, clarity, and agility to really formulate that new sort of world order to that regard in this thinking. And I just wanted to finish really with some key takeaways. So it's adapting and building that exponential mindset, collaborative sort of new business models of abundance and bolder thinking, that part of the white mirror philosophy I was mentioning earlier. Have that journey within, you know, just ikigai, formulating your MTP, and using the right mindfulness tools. So another tool I've got here, which I'll quickly mention, is Muse S-Band, which is another great tool for mindfulness. It's a 5-channel EEG brainwave center. I mean, there's a lot of work happening in this brain-computer interface sort of space. In fact, if any of you followed Elon Musk with the Neuralink, they've been doing bi-directional ECI and some really interesting work happening that, which I've also been involved with some startups. Curiosity, empathy, compassion, applying frugal thinking. In India, we call this jugaad thinking, which is really about using minimal resources to create maximum value, and applying simplicity, and then really looking at rapid experimentation. And another term I've called experiation, which is from old school storytelling to immersive story showing, and looking at transdisciplinarity, because I think we need to become more generalists now. And it's really about looking at multiple industries and across so many other domains that one can work in. And unlearning, I think, certain aspects of old habits, right? Displacing it with more meaningful, and really creating that aspect of foresight, serendipity engine. So I'd just like to finally end with a great saying by John Naisbitt, saying the most exciting breakthroughs of the 21st century will not occur because of technology, but because of an expanding concept of what it means to be human.
Great.
Wonderful, thank you very much. It's a very good way to end it. We've actually got some questions that came through. I didn't quite get a chance to get them in, but we do have a bit of time left, and it doesn't matter if we go over. Did you say something?
I think that Anuraj is going to see how fresh the apple is.
Oh, I'm happy to do that too, So I've got a device here called Skio by Consumer Physics, which is actually almost an electron microscope, which usually costs $30,000, democratized in my palm for $1,200 US. And it's one of the startups I actually was involved with very early on, based in California.
So basically this happened because I did actually give Jason an apple earlier, and Anuraj said, I can tell you how fresh that is. I didn't explain that it's been sitting in my bag for a week, but
I've done the test you do.
We've already, he's not eating it.
I've done the test you do at the supermarket where you stick your finger through it. I've already done that.
You've done that test already,
I've got my measure of it.
So what I'm going to do is just do a very quick rapid scan of this.
So we've got a few
there's a couple of questions here, and much of them are actually around the kind of education space from the topic earlier. There's a comment here from Alicia. School is the breeder of conformity and squashes creativity and individuality, which was very much, what we're talking about before. And I guess, that's...
Agreed.
Yeah.
I think we agree.
It's a very common experience, isn't it?
It is. I actually used to deliver this program called Analytical and Creative Thinking at Work. And we'd ask people why they were there, and we're often people in their 50s and 60s that came to. And the one thing they would share in common was that when they first went into the workplace or leaving school and they had an idea that they shared with somebody, they were told, oh, those are stupid, or that's a silly idea. And they said they stopped sharing those ideas. And then having to undo that fear and that sense of, am I allowed to share an idea or am I not allowed to share an idea with somebody 30 years later is really upsetting, actually. So the more that we can do to harness this at any age is absolutely great.
Yeah, so not just for their experience, but that mentality and that mindset actually gets taken into how organisations form. Like that's how they were kind of created in the first place, or its education system anyway.
Great question there, Alicia.
Yeah. Maybe I'll just drop
show you.
Yeah, tell us about the apple.
How fresh is the apple?
16% carbs, 70 calories and 83 grams of water, and there's a spectral fingerprint. So if anybody wants to see, that's the dashboard of the apple.
That's great.
But there's some great tools and technology out there, which is really democratized and enabling so many new functions out there.
Yeah, very cool. Next comment here from Pete. Careers/jobs change every couple of years. There's no chronological career path anymore. The core skill is critical thinking and imagination. Very true.
Totally.
Yeah.
Well, maybe I'll just give a quick quotation of Albert Einstein.
Yeah.
Imagination is more important than knowledge. Knowledge is limited. Imagination encircles the world. That's Albert.
So again, it's getting back to
somebody who tapped a lot of his brain. So
But it's getting back to valuing that, isn't it?
Exactly. Yeah.
And really recognizing it and valuing it outside of creative industries.
Exactly.
Sorry, I was just reading the third one. How do we make kids better aware of huge amounts of options career-wise in tech that they may not be aware of? Had you heard of DevOps as a kid? Tommy?
That was really interesting because I remember when I started working with people in engineering, and I thought nobody ever talked to me about engineering when I was at school. I mean, obviously I was in the school a long time ago, and I know STEM's come a really long way since then. But at that point, and this is the same question that when we were there, but now I think there's a lot bigger movement, and we need to encourage and be the supporters and partners of education, whether it's at schools or colleges, universities, to really help people understand that breadth.
And there is a lot of startups and different organisations and non-for-profits and so on that actually provide these, code for kids and these kinds of things.
Yeah.
I think it's what we say is STEM education, but I'd sort of take that further and say STEAM or NSTEAM, which is entrepreneurship, science, technology, engineering, arts and mathematics, all need to come together. And that's the transdisciplinary approach, essentially.
And I think that's a really important thing that might just take a moment to touch on. That entrepreneurialism part of that and the innovation side of that, being educated in that way, is hugely important because that's essentially what organisations are lacking. Yes. And that's what they're needing to do more than ever, because they're faced with all this change and they're needing to come up with new value propositions and react to this disruption more than ever, but they're stuck in these old ways. And not only that, but having, as people, which is just I guess around the shift of what's happening in the way people are being employed, it could mean that organisations don't stop employing people, but a shift from mass employment, so they're actually more agile and flexible, to a more decentralised peer-to-peer collaboration of independent people working together on a project, and the project is something that they all have shared values around or something like that. Exactly. And that, I guess in my view, is something that could really be the future of work, where people working on these projects with a huge amount of accountability, they're responsible for themselves and their own income, working together with people they want to work on, is actually a better outcome for the business because they're more flexible and they're getting these highly specialised teams to look after and take ownership of this project.
Yeah, and it's an opportunity also for people to come together into a team and do the work they care about doing, and doing and focusing on the things that they're good at and they enjoy, and then having it's a great experience working in a high performing team with other people doing that.
I think one of the realities of businesses when they're growing, this sense of purpose and what drives us, our value of what we enjoy, and often it gets superseded by the realities of deliverables and commercials and I think there's a question here actually from Sherelle. Can you read that for me, Jason?
How do we move past shareholder value and redefining, I'll start again. How do we move past shareholder value and redefine winning as an organisation that spurs innovation?
And that question about when you're in organisations, and I've helped deliver many values workshops, where we've asked people what are the values in your organisation, and these words get put on the wall, and then people say, actually, it doesn't really matter what I value because it's all about what the shareholder gets. And now what I'm seeing, and I don't know if this is what you guys have also experienced, is where people are looking to invest, whether it's a small amount of money or a significant amount of money, they're really looking for organisations that can help with that, deliver for people, profit, planet, and also that purpose. And actually they're choosing, and it's where we encourage people to choose where they focus that, and how do we support organisations like Digital Village that are really trying to do the right thing by the people in their ecosystem, and how do we attract the right people who want to invest, that they might not get the same amount of return that they would from a defence organisation or another organisation that they want to, where they could get significant more or twice as much, but actually the value that they have and the opportunities they have in creating this, the place in which we all want to live and work, should hopefully add a different set of values. And that's what we need.
It's really
to
when they find the true purpose, and like I was saying, the benefit corporation, the B Corp thinking, but also to avoid those Kodak moments. If they knew that our own employee is going to invent a digital camera, Kodak had realized, they would have actually done other things and actually realized the deeper purpose of what it was about. So I think it really all comes together in a form that you got to think so much more holistically and openly, and value each single employee's contribution.
And see the opportunities that are there, right?
That's it.
There's another comment here which I'll just read out, which is off the back of the one before around the kids making career options, choices. Do you think kids, and also what you mentioned before around imagination actually being the future of things, do you think kids are being prepared to apply information rather than retain it? It frees the neurons for imagination. I mean,
Again, great point. It's really about how do we bring that creative thinking skills a lot more dominant, and that STEM education brings in. I think that's where that entrepreneurship, because you really can't frankly teach entrepreneurship. It's all about bringing the right mindset and the attitudes and the key elements or ingredients that can influence it, which is then that curiosity and empathy, and we talk about experimentation being a very key element of that. So,
and rewarding it. So because it's always an experiment, and some of them are going to fail, and then looking at that and saying, well, what did we learn from that? Rather than failure, it's a failure.
It's a learning.
That's
so learnings from failure. Or, and fail fast to succeed sooner.
And to encourage that mindset. Like, this is interesting. I'll try it and find out what happens.
Correct.
Well, I hope we've still got some people listening.
So I think we'll wrap it up there. That was amazing. Thank you very much.
Maybe
for
I'll just
joining
mention
us.
quickly, like this one thing, and this badge I'm wearing.
Oh, I forgot to ask. Sorry. Anuraj, I have a question. What is the badge that you're wearing?
Sure. So actually, it's a very important activity or element that's happening around the world by the United Nations, and it is the United Nations Sustainable Development Goals, which is actually a 10-year program. And I think what we've got is things like good health and well-being, education as number 4, and then we've got sustainable cities, innovation, and 17 being the partnerships for all the goals. So it's a very broad initiative where I think everybody can tap and contribute and be part of this movement, and actually align White Arrow very closely to the SDGs, because that's where we really see that impact happening on that global level for the future of work that we want to define.
That's great.
Yeah, I mean, I think it's an important initiative because it's something that every organisation can actually do something around that's going to create, and especially if everyone does it, which is the key.
Exactly.
Then it's really going to make a big difference.
Correct.
Okay, so So I guess if you would say, thank you. I guess. Thank you very much. It's been a real pleasure. Thanks, Luke. Thanks, Rach, for joining us. If you would like to learn more about Digital Village, go to the website or get directly in touch with us via LinkedIn. We will be sending out an email to everybody. If you haven't put in your email and you'd like to receive one, go to the webpage digitalvillage.network/stream, and there is a form on there that you can put your email into, and we will send a recording of this event. Plus, you'll be receiving, we're going to do a bit of a breakdown of it with some other takeaways. And there'll also be more information if you would like to get in touch with Anuraj or any of us for that matter about anything at all. And anything else, Luke?
No, I just think it's great to have been able to have this talk, and yeah, you'll absolutely find us on LinkedIn as well, or on our website, digitalvillage.network. We'd love everybody to get in touch and just to find out more about what we've been talking about today.
Yep, cool.
Or to get in touch with us or Anuraj or Rach.
And I'd like to do a specific shout out to Chris, who has worked very hard in bringing this together. And then also, of course, Steve and Gori as well for supporting on that.
Yeah,
Really, Gori, would you mind bringing these up? The pink one is for Rachel, and the green one is for Anuraj. And this is just a thanks for joining us and contributing to the conversation.
Oh, thanks very much. That's a really nice surprise.
You've been looking at it the whole time.
I didn't think it was for me. I thought it might have been a joke where you thought it's for you, Rach, but it's not. Take it away.
Okay, well, thanks a lot for joining, everyone, and we will see you next month. Over and out.
Thank you. All good?
All right.